What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Fantasy Six Pack YouTube channel for the Week 14 Waiver Wire Show. I'm your host, Dylan Clemons, and I'm here to bring you my top 6 waiver wire ads of the week. But before I do that, I would like you to head on over to fantasy6pack.net/plans and become an all-access member. There, everybody, you get access to our award-winning rankings, access to our draft cheat sheets where we have baseball's fantasy drafts coming up pretty quick here. You get access to our F6P Discord where you get custom advice for your league. Plus, you get custom DFS builds from our DFS team, Dave, Eddie, Chris Robin, Chris Fleming, Joe Matz, just to name a few. It's great over there, guys. They do a really good job. And you get access to our DFS projections and our stacking tool just for a small fee of $9.99. So make sure to go ahead and check that out over at fantasy6pack.net/plans. But without further ado, let's jump into my top 6 waiver wire ads of the week. And guys, we have fantasy playoffs right around the corner. So this week is very important on the waiver wire. And the first guy I want to bring up is Tyjae Spears. He's someone who has been in and out of this list all season long. But if you have held on to him up until this point, congrats. Because if you're battling for a playoff spot, he could single-handedly win you this week if Derrick Henry ends up being out with concussion and he remains in concussion protocol. With Henry getting banged up during the game, Spears saw 16 carries for 75 yards and also saw 6 targets, but catching 4 of them for just 13 yards. That's a massive workload for the rookie. And I don't really see anything else or that changing this week with Hassan Haskins as the other running back in this backfield if Henry's out. Unfortunately, the Titans play on Monday night, so you won't quite get that information early. So you're kind of going to be taking a swing if you plug Tyjae Spears in. If Derrick Henry ends up playing on Monday, it definitely hurts the play a bit. The Titans take on the Miami Dolphins this week, which is a tougher matchup as they rank 9th in fantasy points allowed to running backs. But it's hard to argue against Tyjae Spears, even in a tough matchup, because of the workload he saw. And we've seen him be extremely explosive all season. So you get the ball in his hands and just let him go to work. I wouldn't be surprised if Tyjae finishes as a top 15 running back this week if Derrick Henry is ruled out. The next guy is Ezekiel Elliott, running back, New England Patriots, 37.1% rostered. And he made my waiver wire article last week. And if you picked him up and you had to play him with 6 teams on bye, it wasn't bad. Zeke saw 17 carries for 52 yards, so it wasn't pretty on the ground. But what we love to see was the workload he got through the air, catching 4 of his 5 targets for 40 yards, carrying him to a top 13 finish in PPR formats. Ramondre Stevenson, unfortunately, went down with what looked to be an ankle injury, and it sounds like he's going to be sidelined for at least a couple of weeks. And Zeke is going to have a big workload, guys. The only other running backs on the roster are Jermichael Hasty, who they claim from Jacksonville, and veteran Ty Montgomery. The matchup this week isn't going to be a great one against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are also starting a backup quarterback with Mitch Trubisky with Kenny Pickett being out. So this is going to just be an ugly matchup between two bad teams. So maybe this works in the Patriots' favor as they can just kind of grind it out on the ground. And who's better at Zeke than just grinding things out on the ground? He might only get you 3.5 yards per carry, but hey, it's not going to be pretty. But if he sees a good workload, as he should, he could be a viable starter this week. The next guy, Keaton Mitchell, still only rostered in 42.5% of leagues. He's starting to get more and more work with the Ravens backfield, and we may have just happened to forget about him because he had a bye last week and you couldn't use him with 6 teams on bye. But the week prior to last, Mitchell played 33 snaps, leading the backfield ahead of Justice Hill, who had 20 snaps, and Gus Edwards, who had just 19. Okay, this backfield is going to be a 3-headed committee. It just kind of is what it is. But if Mitchell keeps spearheading the backfield, that's great because it seems like these guys all have different styles, different things they add to this offense. Keaton Mitchell, the explosive guy, catches some balls out of the backfield. Justice Hill, change of pace guy. And then you have Gus Edwards, who leading the league in rushing touchdowns, I want to say. And he's the red zone back. And if you get with inside the 20, that's the running back you want. But Keaton Mitchell, with him playing that many snaps, he's an explosive guy. We've seen it all season with him averaging over 9 yards per carry. I shouldn't say all season, the 6 games that he's played. And the last game he played against the Chargers, he got 9 carries for 64 yards and caught both of his targets for 25 yards. If he's getting these snaps, he is someone you can plug into your lineup, even in a tough matchup against Aaron Donald and the Rams this week, who have allowed the 8th fewest fantasy points to running backs this season. That's kind of a thing with these guys that I got on the waiver wire video right now is they kind of have brutal matchups, which isn't ideal, but you might not be able to help it with all the injuries that have happened this past week at the running back position. Next one, giving you a 2-for-1, and it's because of another injury. Unfortunately, Christian Watson went down with what looked like a non-contact hamstring injury as he pulled up late in the fourth quarter. Both Romeo Doubs and Jayden Reed should be rostered already. Jayden Reed was my top waiver wire ad last week. Didn't quite work out. Didn't have a great game against Kansas City by any means. But if you rostered him, you're in luck now if Christian Watson misses some time. Watson missed the first 3 weeks of the season, and we saw what both Doubs and Reed could do a bit in his absence. Doubs saw 20 targets and caught 3 touchdowns, finishing as wide receiver 14, wide receiver 83, but then wide receiver 17 in PPR formats in those first 3 weeks, which you'll take. You'll take that. Jayden Reed was less productive with the same amount of targets, 20 targets, as well, finishing as wide receiver 20 in week 2, but he finished outside the top 50 the other 2 weeks. However, Reed's been coming on strong as of late outside this past week as he's finished as a top 25 receiver in 3 of his past 5 games. We like that as well. Reed even gets carries out of the backfield as they run jet sweeps and stuff. So they're doing everything they can to manufacture touches for Reed. Both of these guys need to be rostered. And if either one or both are on the waiver wire, pick them up. Because they actually have a good matchup against the New York Giants, who've allowed the 5th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers this season. So fire both of these guys up if Christian Watson is out. I have no issue in doing that at all this week. And the next guy is Elijah Moore, and he's someone I've been banging the table for in this video and my article most weeks just because of the target volume he gets. And guys, Joe Flacco is probably the best quarterback option the Broncos have. He just got there 2 weeks ago. He learned the offense, and he came out and looked pretty good. 2 touchdowns, did throw a pretty bad pick. But him and Elijah Moore have chemistry going back to their Jets days together. Like I mentioned before, Moore has had a good year target-wise. He's seen 7 or more targets in 9 of his games this season. But it's just been absolutely inefficient. And it kind of was this week, only catching 4 of his season high 12 targets with Joe Flacco. But he also saw season high 83 yards, finishing as a top 30 wide receiver. Like I said, that's Moore's 4th straight game with at least 7 targets and his 9th on the season. He has a solid role in this offense. And if this passing game becomes more efficient, Moore is someone who you can plug in your lineup if you're dealing with injuries, if you're dealing with the 2 bye weeks with Terry McLaurin of the Commanders being out and someone out. There's another team out as well. There's 2 teams on bye. I don't have that pulled up in front of me, but yeah, Elijah Moore can be plugged in and be just fine this week with Joe Flacco as their quarterback in a decent matchup against Jacksonville, whose defense is good on paper, but they have allowed the 7th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers this season. So I am fine once again trusting Elijah Moore this week against the Jaguars. Last guy here, interesting. This has to deal with another injury. We saw the rookie wide receiver Tank Dell, who is really emerging as the alpha in this offense, go down with the leg injury. It's not good. He got placed on IR. But now let's talk a little bit about Noah Brown. When he's been on the field this year, he's been extremely boom or bust, but there's not many people or players on the waiver wire who has a ceiling as high as Noah Brown has. We've seen him finish as the wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 6 in 2 of the 6 games he has played in this season. This offense is also humming with rookie CJ Stroud running the show, and you absolutely want a piece of it. And you saw what he did with Nico Collins last week, where Nico just absolutely blew up. With Dell being out now, it's going to free up more work for Robert Woods and Noah Brown. But at this point, I would rather have Noah Brown this season and moving forward than Robert Woods. Fortunately, this is a sketchy matchup because they take on the Jets, who have allowed the fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. But with a player like Noah Brown, he's a big play guy. All it takes is one play to save his fantasy week. And if you are looking for a massive ceiling play this week and your lineup really needs it, I think Noah Brown is your guy for a nice dart throw option. But that's it, everybody. That's my top 6 waiver ads of the week. Over on fantasy6pack.net, I did write an article, and I have a list of players who else I like. But that's behind the paywall, guys. So like I mentioned at the top of the show, go ahead and become an all-access member, and you get access to that, along with our award-winning rankings, along with our Discord, and just all sorts of stuff. So head on over to fantasy6pack.net/plans. Make sure you check that out. But yeah, that wraps up the show this week. I will be back on the YouTube channel on Friday previewing week 14 games. But until then, I will talk to you guys next time.